Hello, and welcome to the Evelyn Y. Davis studios at the National Press Foundation. In an age when big outlets dominate the media landscape, small newspapers are often lost in the shuffle. But the journalists at those papers know their towns and their issues in a way big city papers often don't. We're here with one of those journalists today, a small-town editor from Iowa who just won a Pulitzer Prize. The National Press Foundation is a nonprofit dedicated to helping journalists cover complex topics with depth and accuracy. We serve journalists in the U.S. and around the world. I'm Chris Adams, Director of Training at the National Press Foundation. Today, an installment in our Masterclass series. I'm joined by Art Cullen, editor of the Storm Lake Times in Northwest Iowa. The Times has a circulation of 3,000, tiny when you consider that the Wall Street Journal and the New York Times and other major papers have circulations in the hundreds of thousands to well north of 1 million. But last month, Cullen and the Times were right there in the list with the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, the Washington Post, the New Yorker, and other luminaries of the journalism world. He was a winner of a 2017 Pulitzer Prize. Working for one of the smallest news organizations ever to win journalism's top honor, Cullen took the prize in the category of editorial writing for a series of editorials that, in the words of the Pulitzer Board, challenged powerful corporate agricultural interest in Iowa. But Cullen's story is more than just a nice win in a journalism contest. His paper was built from scratch nearly 3 decades ago, giving tiny Storm Lake, Iowa something most cities don't have, newspaper competition. How did Cullen, along with his brother John, do that? That's what we'll learn here today. Art, welcome.
Well, thanks, Chris. It's good to see you again from our days together in Ames, Iowa, about 40 years ago.
Exactly, 30 years ago, not 40.
Okay.
Yeah, so Art and I go back to Ames, Iowa, where you at the time were managing editor or editor of the Ames Daily Tribune, and where I had friends and a wife working there at the time.
Right.
And from the Ames Daily Tribune, a few years later, you went and started the Storm Lake Times.
Correct.
Okay. So I want to talk about that, how the Storm Lake Times came about, but the reason we have you in here today is your big Pulitzer win last month.
Right.
I was hoping you could tell me, you won the Pulitzer for editorial writing for your editorials on an agricultural and water runoff issue in Iowa. We'll talk about that in a little bit. Mm-hmm. But first of all, just tell us about actually winning. I mean, what was it like to win? And you told me just a bit ago that this is only the second time your editorials have been entered. So the only second time that you've entered the Pulitzers.
Right.
First time, didn't win?
No.
And then this time, what happened?
Well, I was watching, the last time I entered, we didn't win, and the winners, I thought, of course, mine were better. And I said, the heck with it. I'm never entering another contest again in my life. And I just said, forget about it. Let's just serve our readers, forget about this stuff. And then a friend of mine who also had won a Pulitzer exactly in 1997, Michael Gartner, for the Ames Daily Tribune, won the editorial writing award from the Pulitzers. And he encouraged me to enter, so I did. And I was watching on a live stream at 2 p.m. on Monday, April 10th at pulitzer.org. And they were announcing the winners, and for some reason I had a hunch that we might win it, and my heart was about beaten out of the cage. And there's 21 categories, I think, or 21 awards, and editorial writing's about number 18, and we won it, and I said, holy shit, John, we won! And my brother John, who's the publisher who founded the newspaper in June of 1990, we stood about 5 feet apart, and we got up and hugged each other, which is the first time we've hugged each other maybe in our lives. We're not big huggers. Yeah. And then my son Tom, who did a lot of reporting on this story, was right there too, and so it was a very special moment for us. I get a little emotional talking about it.
Yeah, and so, I mean, most of the time these days when winners from the big papers win, they've actually gotten some hint or gotten a leak ahead of time that they're going to win. They've known they were a finalist. Then maybe a day or two ahead of time they know that they've won. I mean, I was one of the other winners this year. I mean, they said they found out on Friday in advance of the Monday thing that they'd won.
Oh, they did?
And I mean, it's like the leaks are kind of commonplace, but it was out of the blue for you. I mean,
It was completely out of the blue. I'm not in the Beltway, and so I don't get the leaks, I guess.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was completely out of the blue, although I had this sort of weird inkling that I just knew we had a strong entry, and I felt we had a real shot at it, and I thought, right before they announced my name, I thought, they're going to call my name, I think.
Yeah.
And they did. And I shot out of that chair, and I about went through the ceiling tiles, and then I let out this war whoop, and hugs all around, and the phone started ringing off the hook, and it hasn't stopped since.
Yeah. Okay.
In fact, it'll probably ring during this interview.
Okay. And I just want to kind of share with our listeners the other winners, not each individual entry, but just the organizations: the New York Daily News and ProPublica, the East Bay Times in Oakland, California, the Charleston Gazette-Mail in West Virginia, which is on the smaller side. And then we have the International Consortium of Investigative Journalists, along with McClatchy and along with the Miami Herald. That was that was a project, the Panama Papers project, fabulous journalism. It involved more than 300 journalists as part of their big project. Other winners: Salt Lake Tribune, Washington Post, New York Times, New York Times, New York Times, Wall Street Journal, the New Yorker.
Times, pretty good.
Yeah. Miami Herald, Chicago Tribune, and then we come to the Storm Lake Times.
Right.
And I believe it's one of the smallest papers ever to win your 3,000 circulation twice a week, right?
Yeah, 3,000 twice a week. You got it.
Okay. Well, let me just talk a little bit about the editorials themselves. I'll have you tell me a little bit about the subject matter, but the Pulitzer board said they were editorials fueled by tenacious reporting, impressive expertise, and engaging writing that successfully challenged powerful corporate agricultural interests in Iowa. And I just want to share just a passage so our viewers can get a kind of a flavor of your writing. This is about a water quality issue. Anyone can see how filthy Storm Lake is, how the Des Moines River near Humboldt is a mud flow, how shallow lakes in northwest Iowa have eroded into duck marshes. Anyone with eyes and a nose knows in his gut that Iowa has the dirtiest surface water in America. It is choking the waterworks and the Gulf of Mexico. It is causing oxygen deprivation in northwest Iowa's glacial lakes. It has caused us to spend millions upon millions trying to clean up Storm Lake, the victim of more than a century of explosive soil erosion. And just a little bit later, what's more, the public probably suspects that it should not cost billions of dollars to fix the problem. It doesn't. The solution demands that we quit farming into the ditch and over the fence line. If we left 10% of Iowa's marginal land fallow, the nitrate problem would disappear. Iowa State University research proves it. However, Iowa's political system is immune from such numbers. So tell me a little bit about, I gave you kind of a flavor of what you were writing about and how you write. Tell me about the project. Or the series of editorials, how did it come about? How was the reporting done? And tell me a little bit about the role of your son, Tom, also.
Great. Yeah, if I can go into maybe a little bit of a protracted history. Our pressman and I, Jim Robinson was his name, and we went around, he's a fisherman, and we went around to all these lakes, these glacial lakes in northwest Iowa that were formed by the the Des Moines lobe of the Wisconsin Glacier 14,000 years ago. And they're all sedimenting in from soil erosion. And Jim and I went out, and he's a good photographer, and so we were shooting pictures of all these dying lakes, and we wanted to document them just for posterity's sake. And I was trying to do a story as well, and I was trying to talk to farmers about how they're working the land in a watershed, and nobody talked to me, and that was I was getting stonewalled by people I knew, and I didn't understand what was going on. And but anyway, it's just they were very sensitive about these issues about water quality, and did not want to talk about it. So we went down to the annual meeting of the Iowa Environmental Council, where I was asked to be a speaker, and for reasons that are unclear to me. But I had these pictures, and I showed these pictures, and the CEO of the Des Moines Water Works was sitting next to me on the panel, and he said, "We're going to sue your counties." And this was 3 to 4 years ago. And I said, whoa, okay. And so I went home and immediately wrote the story. And the corporate ag establishment ignored us, the state ignored us, the Buena Vista County supervisors ignored us, everybody ignored us. And then they filed this lawsuit against our county, Buena Vista County. In Iowa, we say Buena Vista, not Buena Vista. Madrid and Nevada.
Yeah, exactly.
So anyway, they sued Buena Vista, Sac, and Calhoun counties, the Des Moines Water Works, which serves about 500,000 water consumers in central Iowa, and over nitrate pollution of the Raccoon River, from which Des Moines draws. It's the primary source of their drinking water. And nitrate pollution causes all sorts of problems, including blue baby syndrome. And there's also a lot of phosphate pollution in the rivers and surface waters that causes cyanotoxins, which can be lethal to humans. And so the waterworks is spending millions and millions of dollars a year cleaning the nitrates out of the river, and then they take the nitrates and dump them back into the river where they head to the Gulf of Mexico. And they're creating a dead zone there the size of the state of Connecticut. And it's destroying coastal reefs, the shrimping industry, etc. So this lawsuit is filed, and the county didn't have insurance for a pollution lawsuit, so they asked their friends if they would defend them. We said, which friends are they? Well, they wouldn't tell us. And the Agribusiness Association of Iowa, in conjunction with the Iowa Farm Bureau Federation, started an Ag Legal Defense Fund after meeting with the executives of Monsanto and Koch Fertilizers, that's the Koch brothers, and formed this fund, and they refused to release any information on who was donating to the fund. Well, these were donations that were being used to defend a public body, the Buena Vista County Board of Supervisors, who were elected by the citizens of Buena Vista County, not by the Farm Bureau. And these were we had dark money in our political system. Now we've got dark money in our court system. So we tried to, with the Iowa Freedom of Information Council, that's ifoic.org, we jawboned them into shutting down that fund because they knew that they were violating the Iowa Public Records Law. So it was really about a transparency issue as opposed to necessarily, we were advocating on behalf of better stewardship, but it was really about, we demand to see these records, and they refused to release them. So through our own reportage, we learned who the big donors were. That would be Koch and Monsanto. And they put a surtax on all fertilizer sales in the state. And but the supervisors eventually realized they were running afoul of the law, and they shut down that fund. And so we got dark money out of the, actually it was a federal court system. It was a case filed in U.S. District Court. So that was our accomplishment, I think. And we also, I think, raised awareness about the problems, the nexus between agriculture and the environment in the Great Plains. And this is the buckle of the Corn Belt we're talking about here, and it's our way of life. And this lawsuit had threatened to upend the entire conventional soy and corn infrastructure in Iowa. So it was a very big deal.
So the Des Moines Waterworks was suing the counties because the counties they weren't doing anything about the pollution that was getting into those rivers?
The counties are custodians of, in Iowa, what we call drainage districts. And Iowa is underlaid by this vast array of drainage tiles that takes what used to be sloughs and marshes and turns it into the most productive corn ground in the world. And we're all very proud of it in Iowa. My grandfather did a lot of work destroying sloughs and turned it into productive farmland back in the 1920s. And well, anyway, these drainage districts these tiles are very efficient at delivering farm nutrients to waterways, lakes, and rivers. And so the Raccoon River is now, a toxic zone from corporate agriculture, which has changed dramatically since 1980, when the older of us will remember the farm debt crisis, which changed everything in Iowa. And so we're still feeling the after effects of it 30 years later.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so the reporting that was done on the stories in your paper and that led to your editorials, tell me a little about how did that reporting come about and who was doing that?
Well, Tom and I, my son Tom, who's 24, been with us a couple of years at the paper, a damn good reporter. He was an econ major at the University of Northern Iowa and was intending to go to law school. And I said, no, be a reporter, that's a lot more fun.
Yeah.
And you don't make any money, but it's a lot more fun. And so he did, and he turned into one hell of a reporter. And so we were working together, which was, again, I get a little choked up talking about it because working with your son's pretty cool. But just working together, Tom went out and confronted the county supervisors and asked them for these records and demanded answers. And they refused to talk to him. The Agribusiness Association of Iowa refused to speak to him, wouldn't return any of his phone calls, didn't comply with any of our requests. So they're having their annual golf outing at the Iowa Great Lakes is what we call them. It's a major tourist destination in Iowa. And they were having their annual golf outing up there, and it's about an hour away from Storm Lake. So Tom drove up to their annual golf outing and marched out to the 14th hole where all these fat cats were playing golf and said, hey, I want answers to my questions. And for the first time ever, they responded to him. Okay. But he had to go out and ruin their golf outing to do it. He went out and gonzoed them. And he thought he was Mike Wallace. Yeah.
And so that's when he was finding out who was giving the money to the...
Well, actually, Tom and I have been doing a lot of work trying to figure out who the donors were, and we kind of figured that out together. And but it was Tom who was going and taking all the flack from the government officials, from the ag people, and I just came in and cleaned up with editorials. And
so your son did all the hard work, and you just wrote some pretty editorials after the fact.
It's real easy to sit back and write, an editorial when he's getting out, getting punched in the nose.
Yeah.
And I'm sitting back relaxing.
Okay. So,
and by the way, he's at home working right now while I'm sitting here talking to you, and so who should get the credit? He should, not me.
Okay. So yes. So Tom Cullen should be getting the credit. Let's declare that right now.
Yes, thank you very much. Okay. Send in a correction to the Pulitzer Committee, please.
Okay. So this was for your prize-winning work was 10 editorials. Were they condensed in a particular part of the year, or were they spread out?
No, they went through the whole year. We've been writing editorials about this for 3 to 4 years, and it was just that these kind of 10 were just crystallized and seemed to state the case. And I was getting to a point of rage and fury that after 3 years, I was so tired of the stonewalling that maybe they took on a new invective.
Yeah, and so I mean, describe your thought in your writing process. I mean, you got to a level of rage. I mean, does that then show in your writing? Does it translate well? And do your readers pick up on that?
I think it probably was translating through the paragraphs you selected. And the readers pick up on it, and they know who our readers know who I am, and they did react to it, some positively and some negatively. Yeah.
Okay. So tell me about what was the reader reaction? I mean, this is a transparency issue between the Des Moines Water Works and a lawsuit.
I believe it was between the citizens of Buena Vista County and the Buena Vista County Board of Supervisors.
Right. Okay.
It was not between the waterworks and them, and it was not between the Storm Lake Times and the supervisors. In my opinion, it's the citizens of Buena Vista County were demanding these records. Right. And the public servants of Buena Vista County were disregarding their own constituents.
And did your readers, were they upset about this lack of transparency as you were?
I don't think so. I didn't hear anybody demanding, go get them, go get them.
Yeah.
No, but I think people in Iowa, I think, are concerned about where the state is going. They're concerned about the state we used to pride ourselves on clean air and clean water, and you'd smell a little cow shit, and he'd say, well, that smells like money.
Mm-hmm.
And that was our main environmental issue when you and I were growing up in Iowa. And we had clean air, we had clean water, and now we don't.
Mm-hmm.
And I think Iowans recognize that, and I think our readers, I think, who aren't have deep emotional investment in the ag supply chain, I think those readers do appreciate what we did.
Okay. So tell me a little bit about your readers and your town. Tell me about, just give me the brief background on Storm Lake. You know, where is it, what's it like, and how has it changed in the 3 decades that you've had your paper there?
Yeah, I was born in Storm Lake in 1957, and I graduated from St. Mary's High School in Storm Lake and went off to school at the College of St. Thomas in St. Paul, Minnesota, and eventually landed back in Storm Lake after having worked at other newspapers in Iowa, only in Iowa, and so I've lived my whole life essentially in Iowa. And Storm Lake is a town of about, the census says 10,079 people, but we believe it's more like 15 to 17,000 because there's it's a major meat packing center. We consider Storm Lake to be a protein center.
Yeah, okay.
And it's a major meat packing center, and about 88% of our elementary school are children of color, and most of them are from Latin America, Honduras, Guatemala, and Mexico. And so we've been very much a champion of immigrants as well. And our congressman from the 4th Congressional District of Northwest Iowa, very heavily rural Farm Bureau country, is a guy by the name of Representative Steve King, who at every opportunity slanders brown people. And these are all my neighbors, and you know, they're all hardworking people. And that's what Storm Lake is. It's a magnet for immigrants. It's an ag trade center. It's a protein center, and it's an isolated rural community that is Buena Vista County is one of the few rural counties in Iowa that's actually posting growth in population. 67 Iowa counties have lost population every decade since 1920. 67 of Iowa's 99 counties, two-thirds of they're Pocahontas County, which is adjacent to Buena Vista County, has a population of about 10,000 people, is projected to have zero population if current trends continue by 2050.
Wow. So
Buena Vista County is growing
Yeah.
because of immigration and because of a lot of the factors that are leading Iowa to these environmental problems.
So the immigration change, I mean, did that happen over the last 2 decades or 3 decades? How long has that been going on?
It goes back to the Vietnam War when, after the Vietnam War, Iowa Governor Bob Ray started a program called Iowa Cares and invited the entire people, Thai Dam people from Laos to resettle. And they resettled an entire culture from Laos and Thai refugee camps into Iowa. And the two main beachheads were Des Moines and Storm Lake. Des Moines and Storm Lake are the only two communities in Iowa with Buddhist temples. And it's really cool. We have 2 Buddhist monks in saris living in this temple.
Yeah.
And it's right not too far from the meatpacking plant in this industrial part of town. And it's this gorgeous gold-plated facility, and it's an interesting place. They figured there's about 21 languages spoken in Storm Lake.
Wow.
It is, without question, the most diverse community in the Midwest. And it's very exciting.
And so is there much in the way, I mean, with the immigrant communities and the traditional, or the communities that have been in Iowa, you know, going back more than 4 or 5 decades, is there tension between those, and is that something that you end up covering a lot? There's
tension, yes. I think there is a red-blue tension in Iowa, just like there's a red-blue tension everywhere. And that Storm Lake strongly supported Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton for president, and has supported anybody who challenges Steve King for Congress. And Steve King was born in Storm Lake, by the way. So yeah, there is a tension there, and because the county voted for Trump and King by a preponderance, I think it was double digits.
So Storm Lake,
they canceled out Storm Lake.
So Storm Lake, the town voted
is blue,
is blue, but Buena Vista County
is heavily red.
Heavily red. Okay. And King wins, I mean, most of the counties up there, easily, right?
There's 33 counties in that congressional district, and I think he won every one of them.
Okay. So I'd like to talk about the business side of the journalism here. I mean, you started, you and your brother started, and then you joined him in 1991 to start the Storm Lake Times?
My brother John started the paper in June of 1990.
90, okay.
And at that time I was working at the Mason City Globe-Gazette. And I came in September of 1990.
Yeah.
Because I told John he was crazy. Don't start a paper. At the time he had been working at Buena Vista University in public relations. And I said, build up your TIAA craft pension, take it easy at BV, and don't start a paper. You're nuts, and there was an incumbent newspaper there. Why do it? Well, he got mad one day. They insulted him, and so he decided he was going to start his own newspaper. 100% Irish.
Now, is he an older brother or a younger brother?
Older brother.
Older brother. Well, they're always right, aren't
they? Yes, and I'm his baby brother. I'm the youngest, so he is always right.
Okay.
And I love him like a brother. But so he decided to start the paper in 1990, and then I just came shortly thereafter.
I mean, when he started, was he publishing before you got there?
Yes, and he said, I told him he was nuts, and he went ahead and did it anyway.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, circulation shot up from 0 to 4,000 in a month, and John said, help, I need help, and he couldn't handle it as editor and publisher, so I came in as editor. And I've been there ever since, 27 years. And I'm so glad I came home.
Yeah. Started in 90, you came in 91.
1990, September of 1990, yeah.
And at the time, there was an existing paper there.
Right.
So, and when you started, were you starting out twice a week or once a week?
We started out as a weekly.
Yeah.
And they were twice a week. Then we had the brilliant idea to go daily. So we went 6-day daily for a year and lost $120,000. And John had the brilliant idea at 2 in the morning to when we were printing. Let's go back and work days and forget about this daily. We'll go twice a week.
Yeah.
So we went twice a week, and Brand X stayed at 6 days a week.
Okay.
And they continued to lose money, I'm sure. And we got healthy real quick. Our circulation had dropped from 4,000 to 1,600. And because people were getting a thin little paper with no news in it.
Because when you were spreading out over 6 days, you mean?
Yeah,
right.
And it was all, I was the staff, the news staff, me and Tim Gallagher. So anyway, it was, we went back to twice a week. Our circulation jumped back up again to 2,400, then up to 3,000. And now the other paper is at, they're about half our circulation now, and they're running 3 times a week. So we've done well.
So in this community of 10,000+ people, we have competing newspapers. That doesn't happen pretty much anywhere else in the United States anymore.
Right.
So, how are your two papers different?
The main difference is we're locally owned. Our motto is Buena Vista County's hometown newspaper, and they're owned by a company out of Cape Girardeau, Missouri, and we believe we understand how to spell people's names and street names. And I grew up there. I know who the guy laying brick is. I know who the guy slopping hogs is, and we just have a lot stronger connections to the community because. And I think that's one of the big problems today with American newspapers is that when they went public and people from 1965 to 1990, they were making a pot full of money at newspapers, and then they started becoming publicly traded. Well, we can't do those 25 to 30% cash flows anymore. We got to get her down to 8% cash flows and be happy with that. But the guy in the TIAA CREF fund isn't happy with an 8% return.
Right.
So that's the problem. Newspapers need to be independently owned. They cannot be owned by publicly traded corporations, or we'll never fix the problem in American newspapers.
And is there a different editorial voice between the two of you, the two papers?
They don't have an editorial voice.
Okay. And how would you describe your editorial voice?
Progressive Populist.
Okay.
That is in the tradition of Tom Harkin. I guess you'd say William Jennings Bryan, Henry Wallace, all the great Iowans. Harold Hughes, we reflect those basic progressive values. Teddy Roosevelt, although he wasn't an Iowan, we'd claim him.
Okay. So, I mean, do you think your readership, grown and sustained while theirs has dropped? Is it because you offer a clear editorial voice, whether they agree with it or not, or is it because you do a better job of covering local sports and doing better obituaries and covering the local news?
It's all those things, but I do believe that having a really strong editorial page helps you sell newspapers.
Mm-hmm.
And I believe investigative reporting and really strong editorials, not the boring editorials you read every day in most newspapers,
mm-hmm.
the ones that put you to sleep, but real kick-ass editorials will sell newspapers.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's all part of the formula, running the baby picture and the dog picture on the front page or the fire
Right.
photo, plus a really good, strong editorial that's well written. And we didn't win in investigative reporting or international reporting or national reporting because we didn't have the resources to do that.
Right.
But we do have the resources to write as well as anybody from Washington or New York or Houston.
Mm-hmm.
And somebody from a little town in Iowa or Kansas, William Allen White was a famed editor from Emporia, Kansas, wrote the editorial, "What's the Matter with Kansas?" And it just shows that you can do great work on the editorial page even though you don't have the resources.
Mm-hmm.
All you need is passion and an ability to put a sentence together.
And so how, describe for me your day-to-day life. I mean, your job as editor, how much of your time are you spending on the writing the editorials part versus editing the copy versus, getting in the press room, doing all?
Yeah, until last May, we used to have our own press, our own newspaper press, and I was one of two pressmen.
Yeah.
So I was running the press with my buddy who was also a photographer.
Yeah.
And we ran the press together, and I miss him terribly. He retired. And I miss the press terribly, too, although I don't miss that work. But when I gave that up, when I gave up the press, it really, I feel like I wasn't doing anything.
Mm-hmm.
And but I spend my mornings, I'll spend an hour writing an editorial, and then in the afternoon I'll spend another hour and write a column, and then I start working my son's copy and start laying out pages and, greet customers, sell a classified ad over the phone.
Mm-hmm.
That's what you do at a weekly newspaper.
Right.
And I deliver newsstands. My brother John drives mail bags around the county to various post offices. And, that's the life of a weekly newspaper.
Do you have a home delivery network?
No, we use the U.S. Postal Service.
Okay. All right. And you said you don't have a printing press anymore?
No, we now print in Sheldon, Iowa, about an
Okay.
hour away from us. The press and both John and I were getting too old.
Yeah.
And so we realized it was more efficient to print off-site. Although it kind of ripped half of my heart out because I always identified our independence with that press.
Right.
And I know it sounds sentimental and mopey, but that press meant a lot to us.
Yeah. So do you put it on eBay? What do you do with the old presses?
It's sitting in the basement of the Carroll Times-Herald. It has
Okay.
an identical 1973
Yeah.
Harris Cottrell V15A, and so they're like a good farmer. They're parking it in the Grove.
Okay.
Going to use it for parts, one of these days when they ever get around to fixing their press.
All right. So since you started in 1990, the paper started in 1990 until today. I mean, in the mid-90s and then into the 2000s, the internet decimated many newspapers, particularly because of classified ads and other news access reasons. How has the internet affected small papers like yours?
Well, I don't think it's affected us that much because Iowa has 280 community newspapers, and everybody in Iowa practically reads a community newspaper, and it is the common voice of Iowa. And so I don't think Facebook and Twitter have done anything to us in that regard. A weekly paper is different than reading the New York Times. When you sit down with your weekly newspaper with the obituary page and all that, it's different than scrolling down through headlines on your cell phone with the New York Times. And it's a completely different reading experience. So each has its place. What I fear is that the newspaper industry is abandoning print rapidly, and by doing that, they're compounding their problems.
Okay, and so And do you guys have a Facebook presence at all?
No.
Okay.
Oh, we do have a Facebook
Yeah.
page, but we don't do anything with it, and we don't Twitter, and
Tweet.
tweet. We don't tweet either,
Okay.
or Twitter.
Or Twitter. Okay.
We don't do any of that stuff.
Yeah.
We
So
do have
I'm-
a website, and it contains a replica edition, a digital replica of the newspaper. So
Yeah.
snowbirds in Arizona and Texas can read the newspaper in real time, but we don't try and market our website. We believe that print is our product differential.
Mm-hmm.
That's how we sell our product. It's much more enjoyable looking at beautiful color photos in print. And we're very graphically oriented. My brother is a photographer by trade and in training, so we run big pictures in color and a lot of them. And there's just a certain joy to the whole idea of paper and graphics that we old Luddites just aren't going to give up on. And I believe that in a town where half the population can't read English, and we still have, so that would leave you with 5,000 households we believe are literate in English, functionally literate, and out of 8,000, and we've got 3,000 of them. That's pretty good. That's
Right.
better than the Des Moines Register's doing in their central Iowa market. It's better than the New York Times is doing in New York. We have higher penetration per household than those other papers do. So we're doing something right. And the Minneapolis Star-Tribune is doing the same thing. They're putting together a paper that's big, fat Sunday paper with a big, beautiful, glossy magazine in it. And people are eating it up. Print circulation is rising on Sunday. So I think the newspaper industry is making a big mistake by running away from print.
And your website, do they have to be a subscriber to get the content, or do they have to just be registered?
Yeah, the only thing we provide for free are the ads and the editorials. We want to spread our voice as far as we can, but anything else, no, you can't get beyond our paywall.
Because I think the day of the Pulitzers, I went to your website to find out a story about you, and I could read the first paragraph.
That's right.
Beyond that, I needed to subscribe.
That's right.
Okay.
The newspaper industry has to quit giving away its gold.
Yeah. Okay. So from a business standpoint, to keep the business side, the company humming, what other sorts of things do you do? You also have a paper called the Progressive Populist that you've had for a while, and you circulate around the country. Tell me about that.
Yeah, my brother Jim, we're a family of newspaper rats,
Yeah.
and my brother Jim used to work for newspapers in Texas, including the Texas Observer. And after editorial differences with Hearst newspapers, he decided to decamp the Austin Bureau for Hearst and start the Progressive Populist, this twice monthly publication that targeted at left-wing zealots.
Okay, and that's and is that produce revenue for?
Yeah,
for
well,
you
yeah. I
guys, or
mean,
is
it was a
separate?
printing customer for us,
Okay.
and it produces a little revenue for the newspaper. Mainly, it provides my brother Jim with a job and a voice, and we're pushing what we believe. And I don't know how long the Populist will last because the internet has impacted that. Commentary is pretty cheap on the internet,
Right.
and this is all commentary. So those commentary journals are having a tough time.
Okay. So I think.
But we also do commercial printing. We print it on our own press, and we still sell printing, and we design newsletters, and we do a lot. We do anything we can to bring in a few bucks here or there. So, it's just. We just survive with crumbs off the table. And somebody said today that I guess the average wage for a newspaper person is $37,000 a year, and that might be a little high on the Storm Lake Times scale.
Yeah.
So,
would you say, is the paper as a business getting by, thriving? How would you describe it?
well, we
overall?
were losing money for 20 years, and it was the last, 5 to 10 years where we actually started making money. Breaking into the black.
Yeah.
And so if we would get a 5 to 10% cash flow, we're just tickled.
Yeah.
If we can end the year with a $25,000 profit, we're real happy.
Okay.
And I think it was Abe Rosenthal once said the difference between a good newspaper and a great newspaper is a little loss or a little profit.
Mm-hmm.
And he is absolutely right. When
Right.
we were losing a little bit, we were a good newspaper.
Mm-hmm.
When we started making a little bit, we became a great newspaper.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So we've during this conversation ticked off or mentioned many of your family members,
Yeah.
but I don't think we mentioned Dolores yet. So tell me all of whom.
Better not forget Dolores,
Yes.
my wife.
Tell me all the family members that
Yeah.
are involved and what their roles are.
Okay, my brother John is the publisher. He's our fearless leader
Mm-hmm.
from Bullwinkle.
Yes.
And his wife Mary does society features for us, recipe column. We still call it society.
Mm-hmm.
I should call it family and friends.
Right.
And Dolores, my wife, is a tremendous illustrator and photographer and feature writer. And she really she and Mary put the life of the community into the paper. You know, we can talk about politics and government
Mm-hmm.
and public records and all that stuff, but what they really want to read is what Mary and Dolores are putting in the paper. That's
Mm-hmm.
the interesting stuff.
Right.
You know, the three-legged goats and those kind of stories.
Yeah. And then your son Tom is a reporter?
Yeah, my son Tom is our
The only reporter?
yes.
Okay.
And then we have a sports editor and an ad sales rep and an ad compositor and a news compositor and a receptionist, and that's the staff.
Okay.
So there's 4 Cullens, 4 or 5 Cullens, and we have Mabel the news hound too. She's a beautiful English setter, and she greets all the customers at the front door.
Yeah.
And about 9 out of 10 pet her.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
then the one who has the black pants on says, "Get away from me." But the
Okay.
dog actually sleeps on the newsroom floor.
Yeah.
So-
Okay. And the sports editor, I mean, do you guys intensely cover local sports? And does he
Yeah.
have stringers, or how does he cover a
No,
local
we
high
cover
school?
we cover several regional high schools in sports. It's all prep sports, and it's all about pictures of kids
Yeah.
in the paper. And he covers it all himself. So he's every Tuesday and Friday night. He's at a basketball or football game shooting photos, and that's what we trade in. That's how we cover a lot of small communities. Primarily is through sports and those pictures. And we want to cover every refrigerator in Buena Vista County with pictures, and that's our goal.
Okay.
And so that's how we try to sell newspapers is through celebrating families and so on and so forth. And then you put the serious news in there too. Fulfill your mission. But we sell papers with hard news and a lot of fluff.
So they come for the pretty pictures of their kids, and they get a little bit of you talking
Right.
about water quality.
Right.
Okay.
Exactly.
All right. Well, I think that's all the time we have for right
Okay.
now, Art. I want to thank you very much.
It just got boring.
Congratulations very much again on the win,
Okay.
and thank you very much.
Okay. Well, thank you, Chris.
Okay, and thank you for joining us today from the Evelyn Y. Davis Studios at the National Press Foundation, where we make good journalists better. Today we've heard from Art Cullen, editor of the tiny Storm Lake Times in Northwest Iowa, who last month won the Pulitzer Prize for his fearless editorials that hit hard at the issues that matter most to his readers. Find more webinars and reporting resources at nationalpress.org and follow us on Twitter @NatPress.